Hi, this is Privateer Station, and this is the second part of the stream for day 643 of Russian war with Ukraine. And we're picking up where we left off right after the appeal to our viewers to please support the family of Andrew Weber, the veteran who died defending Ukraine from Russian aggression. The link to that GoFundMe raiser is at the bottom of this video. So if you can, please click the link and go donate to support his wife and the remaining two little kids. And with this, let's deep dive into day 463. Enjoy. So the first story, let's touch on our questions. This one is about the attacks, the Jackal Express, as you said, on Bezuglia. It is also a reaction to basically the other part of that express that is attacking Zaluzhny as well. Yeah, our Jackal Express became one of the main technology in the country now. And I don't know, is that a sign of civilization? Is that a civilizational method of warfare internally or changing things? Or is it somewhat from the world of heathens? Yeah, I don't know how to call it too. I would call it some sort of game that's going on. And the head of the party fraction, David Arahamia, and he's a congressman as well, and a congressman Bezuglia. Yeah, he, by the way, is the member or the leading member of the Committee for Defense, right? Right. So they did, by the way, request this plan. Yeah, this is that committee that needs the plan for war. Okay, maybe I'm wrong, but I was trying to follow his interviews where he was talking about we demand a plan for 2024, and Zaluzhny is not giving that plan to us. And Bezuglia also added that lack of this plan to her narratives. He's saying, Nikolay, that nobody has the battle plan. He is acknowledging that military political leadership of the country does not know how are we going to fight this war in 2024, and he's the head of the ruling party. And he's addressing his questions to Zaluzhny, right? He is not saying Zelensky doesn't know. Well, we discussed before that they decided to split the responsibility between Johnson and Zaluzhny. And I want to say that there is indeed a direct attack on Commander-in-Chief because he is highly supported by society and he is seen as the political competitor to the current power. And they are bringing up the question, which is kind of valid, why do we not have a defense plan? But one should also ask, why is he not giving that plan, right? And I can just drop here a couple versions. First, he doesn't trust y'all, and second, he doesn't want to show that, to reveal that in public. So, Commander-in-Chief, he did outline the 2024, right, in the military side and his plans. Well, I think he can continue the logic that he was referring to in The Economist. The army did everything we could, give me new opportunities, give me new capabilities, and will redefine our strategy. But you guys are not doing that because he cannot go and buy 500 missiles or change military-industrial complex. He can't even build fortifications along the front line. It's between the Ministry of Defense and the construction agents. So he's saying that the army did everything we could. And you guys, how about you provide me some parameters to calculate this plan of defense? And if you cannot answer my question, what kind of industrial capacity, what kind of supplies shall we have in 2024? How can I create such a plan? Arahamia is saying that if we have certain amount of tanks, we can achieve certain things. And Zaluzhny could be pushing back to Arahamia, saying that with his position, saying that, well, at least define how many tanks will I have, then I can plan that. So it's continuation of the same logic that he was going for in The Economist. I think Arahamia also mentioned an important thing in his interview, kind of reluctantly, but he said that I'm very upset that some SOFA experts from the internet in their Facebooks are talking about us not producing anything. I know how things are going on for real, and I know that we are manufacturing. And the things that we have not manufactured a lot, we will be manufacturing a ton more by the end of the year. I just cannot release all the nomenclature, but it would be so nice to grab those sofa experts by the neck and give them a close tour of all these military industrial factories that are now ramping up the production. So my question is, right, he cannot disclose that data to people at large, but he could have at least shared that with Zaluzhny, right? Sure, they can gather a group of experts, a group of congressmen. There are critics of current power, like Sergei Rakhmaninov, gather a group from them, and so that the group would have some weight, not just some people from, not some bloggers from the online. So give them a tour, show them some numbers, calm down the population and saying, hey, this is what is happening. And so that it's not just the head of the party, but the head of the political fraction, but actually a combined group that comes out and confirms that, yes, indeed, we're good. I can actually reaffirm that indeed we have ramped some things up in our military industrial complex. We indeed have it, but unfortunately, it still follows that military principle: bad, too little, not enough. For 30 years, we've been dumping down the drain our defense potential, and then in 2 years, when the war is going on, when Russia is actually targeting every facility that can manufacture certain things, it's not so easy to ramp up the overall production. So it's difficult to expect that our military industrial complex will just shift gears that easily. And he did say, Alexei, that we are making something of in terms of millions that we have not manufactured before. Right, Nikolay. But the thing is, it's not Zaluzhny and it's not Zelensky and Arahamiya who need to feel that difference in production. It needs to be felt by every commander in the trench, where he would look back and say, oh my God, we have a ton of this now. And until this is not happening, maybe it will happen in a month, right? Maybe all the soldiers and commanders who are sending us messages and asking for funds to support certain things, perhaps they'll start writing messages back and saying that I don't know what these bloggers are talking about. We have enough. We don't know where to put the excess on at least a certain nomenclature of supplies. Right. But for now, they're screaming that we don't have enough. Well, Nikolai, if we're doing the fundraisers daily for nails, for plastic, for wood beams, yeah. So first thing, yes, the soldier, the supplies for the fighting units is the criteria. Do we have enough? Do we have not? So communication needs to be important too. So gather as a government, gather the skeptics, gather the critics, show them some of the production factories. Maybe blindfold them so they cannot pinpoint where the factory is, but make sure you show them this manufacturing capability so that they can come back and confirm, yes, indeed, yeah, there are certain deficiencies, but indeed our country is building some stuff. Right. I don't even have, Alexei, any qualms about the opposition in this case. I think the main point that I was trying to bring is the communication deficiency. Right. Communication is one part, but the soldier on the front, he either has the FPV drone or he doesn't. And since the soldier knows just fine what is he missing, what is he lacking, landmines, artillery shells, bullets, FPV, you cannot deceive the reality, right? All these screams that are about nothing. All right, we will get back to David Rahamia. He is commenting on a few other questions as well about Boris Johnson and negotiations. But following that Jackal Express about Zaluzhny, I want to mention that there was an interview by a military expert from Azerbaijan, Rustam Zadeh, who talked with Natalia Maseychuk, and his theses were pushed today by people who are very close to head of the office of Tymoshenko, ex-head of the office of Tymoshenko when she was in power. And Rustam Zadeh said directly that if the general or commander-in-chief do not follow with the orders given to them by superior commanders-in-chief, or if officers refuse to follow the orders of commander-in-chief, they need to be replaced, right? So he's highlighting the other part of the problem, apparently, that David Rahamia, Mariana Bezugla, and Zelensky's bloggers, they're pushing for this kind of jackal attack on Zelensky. Or they're just trying to please Zelensky without coordinating their actions with him. What do you think? Well, different things are possible, but even if they are not coordinating their posts and efforts with Zelensky, it still remains an attack against commander in chief. Now, is there a fault? Is there any fault in all these executions of orders within the military? Of course, it is. It is somewhat like a feudal society right now. It's not too developed, but yeah, still, definitely, you can criticize Zaluzhny and you criticize others, but you can do that only only on one condition. If you fulfill all of his demands as the commander in chief, at least to start, let's start with giving him all the real power that he needs. My favorite topic is to adopt the law that's already in draft with Congress with our Ukrainian Rada for about a year and a half. The law that would delineate responsibilities between commander in chief and minister of defense and president. And they still have not adopted it. So if I was Zaluzhny, he can come out and say, guys, I do not have any official duties according to our current legislature. You're not giving me capabilities to fulfill those duties that also do not exist. So what can I do? What can you accuse me of? But I want to say also that in a sick system, in a sick government, there could not be one subsystem that is totally healthy when everything else is subpar. Even if in the military you find some super angels who always do everything fine and always are fantastic and make best decisions, well, maybe you can increase in that system your efficiency by 15%. It won't be too drastic. And army is the cut of a society in a way. And if society is sort of a clan system of relations like back in the 17th century, you will find the same in the army. It's just that there are politicians above the army who make decisions, so the army can come back and say, yeah, we perhaps did not achieve certain goals, but look who is commanding us. Look what resources we have. Those commanders that you sent to the front, they take an ROTC course, and that's he supposedly is a lieutenant, but he knows nothing. He doesn't even know how to disassemble the rifle. And that's how your system works. Or if you want me to not have enough refusers in my detachment, that's another issue. So when I was back in the office, I was a consultant of a group that was called upon to solve a certain issue. Everybody in the military knows that when there are two people appearing in the company who are screaming everything is lost, then in 12 hours your company morale is going down the drain. So according to our current laws, neither military police nor any body could actually detain these two screamers. So first you needed to maybe take them to medical examination, and then after that you could try to do something. And I think it's order number 402. So all this medical validation is following the laws of the peace times. So that meant that when the refusers from Solidar Bakhmut would be brought to that commission, they would have to be brought there during certain hours, and it's further out in the logistics area. So when you get there, as my commander of battalion says, he brought a bunch of his to these doctors. There are already 1,500 people already sitting there and laughing in the face of all the commissions and all the military, because the medical commission can pass maybe 30 people a day. And in the meantime, Wagner is pressing and pushing through the defense of Soledar and Bakhmut. So until this order was changed, this is how things worked. So that commission worked inside the government trying to figure out how to remove this order. And it took us at least 3 months together and how to figure out in the government to gather all the people that needed to be there to change this order, to remove those who are affecting the morale of military troops from the front. So I'll also tell you another story that happened, I think it was right before the war, when Mariana Bezugla made a statement also that we need to return norm that allow commanders to use force against the refusers, like in every army of the world. Oh, you mean to execute them? Up to that. And by the way, I'll open you a serious mystery here. Military asked her to do that, to bring up this matter. She did not volunteer. This position, this order, this feature was built in our military system before. And before, in our military regulations, the commander it was said, commander, not as he can do that, he should do that. And when that was removed from the regulations, the commander has no tools left what to do with people who are trying to break the morale. So the best thing they can do, they can bring them to a medical commission, and then there are 3 overworked doctors who are probably there reviewing whatever they already have, and it'll take them at least 3 months to process the existing line. So our system first made commander helpless and the whole military system, and then they're screaming that military failed on the front. I can give you another example. It's very specific, but many people will at least understand. I'm sure military experts will understand this. Ukrainian armed forces is the army that is managed mostly by operation instructions, also known as field messages. Recently, when I was talking to my friends who are younger officers and sergeants, one of them is 7 years in the army, another 5 years in the army, the third 3 years in the army. I asked them, how many orders, how many battle orders have you heard? They're saying, no, I haven't, we haven't. So army is only managed by warning orders and tactical instructions and fragmented orders. Do you know what it means? Not really. Okay, I'll read it for you. The main purpose of fragmented order or tactical instruction is to replace or serve as the instruction in conditions when a battle order has not been set yet. Do you understand what it means? It means that they're not using the word order because after the order is used, there is some judicial responsibility coming upon both parties, the one that gave the order and the one that failed to execute the order. And then they could be investigated based on the different articles of regulations. And if somebody cannot fulfill the order, he can come to the commander and say, you know, according to your order, I have to fulfill it, but before I do it, you need to make sure that I have all the logistics and all the resources because you have not provided me with A, B, and C. And commander is also responsible because he cannot really give an order to do something without providing proper support. So he can also pressure the subordinates to go fulfill the order because it's an order, but also he has a responsibility to provide them with resources. And those famous orders 200, when people are saying they were ordered to go and die and basically go there and here are the coordinates, roughly what you'll need to do, kind of an approximation what to do in the area. And that's where they go and how they fight. Sometimes one of them said they get the orders, but the word order is mentioned in the 3rd paragraph. And for all the military of the old school, who understand the difference between a fragmented order or a warning order and a real battle order, I was very surprised. Order is definitely an element that brings upon judicial responsibility at the end of it. And if somebody fails to obey an order, it starts with 8 years in prison for that. So they're creatively avoiding it. And that tells you that the army doesn't know what are they fighting for. They don't have a task, they don't have a set order, what to do and how to fight. And that's why they're sending soldiers to go take a machine gun and fight from under a tree over there. And when somebody raises a question, we don't have a battle plan, well, we don't really have it since February, come to think of it. And we don't have it back, didn't have it back when the Crimea was occupied. Neither president has the plan, nor the soldier down on the ground has it. No orders. And that's one side. The other side is that officers are afraid to take responsibility on all levels. So what would you want from that system? And remember Solidar and Bakhmut, there were instances there when one famous brigade, I will not name it here, but it basically ran almost entirely in its entire total number, and they failed the defense line for Solidar significantly. And military people know which one I'm talking about. There was no military order. It was not properly provided to support the area, so nobody can be prosecuted for this. And that's it. That's how our system works. Nobody wants to take responsibility. Nobody has it, and nobody knows who's doing exactly what and why. All right, let me clarify legal and moral aspect of some things. So you're saying that from the military side, military management system is being drained of responsibility to manage their troops via executions, those that actually sometimes need to happen. Well, not that's not the only lever. I'm saying that the political leadership is failing to provide fixed political and clear political goals so that the defense would be matching these goals, the orders would be matching these goals, because the borders of 1991 are completely unreal. And if it is what is demanded from the troops, this is the best way to demoralize the commanding structure, because the art of war is converting political goals into military goals and military achievements and military goals into political goals. So when political leadership formulates very obscure and murky overall goals of the campaign, that demoralizes the whole army. It doesn't matter how many stars the soldier has on his rank. 8 stars or 0 stars, doesn't matter. You cannot give him an instruction, go there, die on this hill, and then you'll also be responsible for all the failures. Okay, so regarding that criticism about the meat storms like Russia was doing, that's in some parts of our front, some of our commanders do that. And also the situations when we cannot use, our commanders cannot use arms to punish soldiers for total blatant refusal to carry out the orders or go fight. Yeah, it is definitely an issue on both sides. One thing is lacking enough confidence, enough structure to actually punish the ones who refuse to fight. And the other is also some of our officers, you can see, belong to the old Soviet school that don't mind sending soldiers to just die. So we need to have a more flexible system, the one that actually forbids commanding officers to send troops just to waste them for stupid tasks. And the other one also, on the other hand, you need to have a strong system that would give them enough punishment tools to make sure, and so that soldiers also know what happens, what responsibility comes to them if they fail to execute the order. The first thing you're taught in a commanding school, you never give an order that is unexecutable. This is the sure way to demoralize your group and to unlock a special achievement that they will basically stop listening to you. And people on our highest military command level, unfortunately, have no idea how to manage military groups in critical situations. And the thought here is not to give officers a right to execute soldiers if they refuse, but to create a flexible system. Like Sun Tzu said back in his Art of War, if you want to understand the army, see how the soldiers are being rewarded and how they're being punished. That needs to be done clear. And of course, there would be refusers everywhere. In every army, there are some refusers, even if the army is enthusiastic, even in Israel. So you need to make sure the army is provided enough, that there are enough resources so the army can carry out its goals. The other side of it is that if society is rotten, the army cannot be a shining city on the hill. And if you have idiot commanders, idiot congressmen, idiot politicians, you will likely have idiotic officers. And the question is how to build that system, and does anybody want to build this system? Deterioration starts with unrealistic, unattainable goals. That's why battle instructions instead of real orders. In the order, you would have to not let the enemy break through the line by that time or capture something by that time. And instructions, they just a reflection of situation at large in the country with the goals of this war. All right, concluding the topic of Zaluzhny and Jekyll Expresses. Okay. So Zaluzhny is being run over by a Jekyll Express, which has certain relations with the Speaker of Power, the Speaker of Rada, Duma, Congress. And if Zaluzhny will be removed, if that Jekyll Express actually launches a scenario when he is removed, then it creates another situation because he has a ton of support in the society. Just like Khomyak was saying, Zelensky is being sent to us as Joker, and he has the right to do all the idiotic things, and he probably will do all the idiotic things that the Joker can do. And it may, in some scenario, also have firing of Zaluzhny. But again, when Zaluzhny is being attacked so much, he can always retort and say, guys, I only am mentioned twice in all the legal documents in the country. Maybe I made some mistakes, but in these conditions, when I have no legal authority and I'm only mentioned twice in the whole set of the documents that we have here, and if you're letting me go to Ramstein on the 19th month of war for the first time, what do you want? And at the end, who would bear the responsibility? Individual, historical, factual? Zaluzhny, of course, will carry some responsibility if there'll be discovered some mistakes by him. They likely will find that he was lacking resources or authority to execute certain things. All right, but at the same time, Danilov and Dislavsky, the representatives of political leadership in our Congress, they actually attacked these Jackal Expresses, and they said this is the plan, part of the Russian plan, to use so-called fracture lines between commander-in-chief and superior commander-in-chief. And Sislavsky is saying that behavior of Bezugla is a serious violation, and her presence in this committee, due to her behavior and publications, is definitely a threat to national security due to her actions. So it implies, it appears that the other wing of presidential office, presidential power, is sort of defending Zaluzhny and Bezugla. And that signal I do not know how to read. It seems like a certain game happening. Right. They are figuring what statements to make in regards to Zaluzhny. Sislavsky and Danilov, they are in a conflict with Bezugla for a while. And they actually picked up the Jackal Express leadership in this case against her because they had issues with Mariana for a while. She was picking them on them for reasons. She actually was definitely picking on legit issues that they were letting fall through before. So they have a chip about her. And she definitely is pro-Ukrainian. You can argue about what and how she does, but she definitely is a patriot of the country. And the fact that these two guys are now trying to get rid of her by throwing more wood into the fire, that definitely paints them in a not favorable light. But I think they've been painted all over already. They're painted on the outside and rather dirty on the inside. And one of them has been mentioned in our stream for quite a few occasions when, he comes out and says everybody's a Russian spy. That reminds me of Poroshenko times, President Poroshenko, the last days of his rule, when everywhere he implemented that plan, Wandering Bear, and every president in Ukraine starts differently but finishes in the same fashion, that there are Russian spies everywhere that want to depose him. So we can probably post a question about the system of power, and then you can have a valid question. How good is your system when, let's say, two agents, if they are, Bezugla and maybe Arestovich, can rattle the whole system, right? How stable it is. When they say don't rattle the boat, does it mean that the boat is so flimsy that two people, that Arestovich and Feldman, can rattle the country? 1.5 million military, super concentrated power, 2 videos published on the YouTube by Tkach and Arestovich and Feldman, they can break the system? What kind of a system are we talking about? And how did you allow supposed Russian spy Bezugla to work for, 5th year in Congress, being a second person in the Committee on Military, right? And the whole fraction of the party now is facing the same question, probably. So Mariana Bezugla, by the way, she mentioned you as well, Alexei, and she asked to listen to Arestovich's opinion because he actually recommended Zaluzhny to be appointed to that position together with his colleague Mashevets. So maybe you can comment on this. Yeah, she means Roman Mashevets, the vice head of the presidential office for the military questions. And I knew that this question would come up at some point. So recommended is an understatement. I knew this question would come up at some point. And I don't know how it will sound. Some people will say I was boasting, but let me open a window in one year-long intrigue about replacing Khamchuk and Taran as two figures who were arguing against each other, with each other, and who were breaking apart our military forces. So me and Roman, we were very concerned about the state of our military, and we conducted a year-long operation or intrigue, if you want to say, which resulted in Minister of Defense and Commander-in-Chief were replaced. And not only them, by the way, Roman, he was suggesting a different figure. I will not name him. He was not suggesting Zaluzhny. I was the fan of Zaluzhny. Of course, President was the one who appointed him, but we did make an effort to make sure that Zaluzhny would end up in this position. A little bit. All right, good. Now, and answering the question from Mariana, if I'm ashamed by recommending Zaluzhny, absolutely not. I think it was one of the saving decisions made by Zelensky at the end. And we can actually ask Mariana herself, how much did you work to give Zaluzhny real responsibilities and real tools to perform his duties? Zaluzhny himself can ask Mariana back this question. What questions do you have to me if you guys failed to define or differentiate the responsibilities between superior commander-in-chief and commander-in-chief? So let's go back to Arachamia and Istanbul negotiations. And maybe not only that, because David Arachamia was talking first about the Belarus part of negotiations, how he was traveling there, and then he talked about Istanbul. And in my opinion, he was mixing some of the statements there. Maybe I'm wrong, but he, even about Johnson, made one statement, then the other statement. So at first, Johnson becomes sort of the reason for discontinuation of the negotiations, and then he becomes not the reason. And that, according to some of his statements, that we were just convincing Russians that we're serious. In reality, the negotiations were not serious, and we're just winning time for Ukrainian military, waiting for military to gain successes on the battlefront. So a question to you as the participant, as a person who partook in different processes in the office. So did you guys have the tasks to conduct these negotiations not for real, both in Istanbul and Belarus? All right, let's go this way. David, of course, was the head of delegations, so he had more power than I did. But I had my segment of it. I was leading the military part for a while, and then Belarus started a criminal prosecution case against me, I understand prompted by Russia, and I could not be there in person anymore, but I was still behind the scenes. I was participating in it. So I wanted to say that negotiations were real. They were supposed to be ended with an absolutely real negotiational result, an agreement, and the one that would be very beneficial to us, by the way. And Russia would not go for these terms again unless we get maybe 15 times the weapons that we have right now. And I'm afraid we missed this opportunity, historic opportunity, forever. However, there may be some small percentage that the West might come back to its senses and we may get Russians to the negotiation table again. But negotiations in the same flavor with the same demands will not be there anymore anyway, because Russians now understand that the West has weaknesses, that we have weaknesses. And the attempt to mask these negotiations that we're not doing what we're doing by concealing your labor and saying that that was not what we fought for, no, I don't think it's the right strategy. Lying internally would mean lying externally. That'll throw a whole need to create other structure of lies that what were we doing there on negotiations and why was it done. So no, we were there for real. And the question though still stays. In Bucha there were 600 dead. After this negotiations fell through, 300,000 were dead on both sides of the front, right? So you can put these on the scales. If you bring Johnson in the picture, he did promise, as David says, support of the West, right? And if that was represented, if that was promised to us, that we will get enough support, and then we were given 5 times less, then bring it to light. Tell us who made these promises and who failed on them. Because otherwise, you create a mixed signal to the society at home and international society. You're saying the negotiations were worthless. We knew that nothing will come out of it, and we were behaving them diligently. And then Johnson came and broke our worthless negotiations and threw us into the protracted warfare. Yeah, broke them and didn't break them, right? Or pushed us or nudged us towards. So some responsibility is being thrown at him, but it's not articulated precisely how much. So the guilt of Johnson is what? Canceling worthless negotiations? If they were worthless, then he is not responsible. And if they were important, then who else is responsible besides Johnson? That we actually fell through these negotiations and went for a protracted war. So it's a wicked signal, really. Maybe I'm an idiot and I don't understand things. You can blame me on this, but I would say that negotiations were very intense. You can actually film a whole movie or TV serial about that. It was a very dedicated, very difficult, very a lot of work under pressure, and on the backdrop of our work of negotiations, there was actual events at the war theater when Russians would go try to attain certain goals, fail, get defeated there, and then they would remove certain asks from the table. So it was very intense, very real. And maybe at some point I'll publish some memoirs on that. That's a fascinating story, really. And frankly, I don't have any formal obligations, so I'm not in official position. I could probably start talking about it now, but I prefer to stay on the side of doing no harm, so I'll wait till the war is over and then I'll publish some stuff. But I'll just say, overall, the negotiations were super serious. All right, let's jump to another aspect when Arachamia is saying that, trying to explain why the West is not giving a victory over Russia to Ukraine, he's repeating almost the same thing that you are saying here, that the West doesn't know what to do with a broken apart Russia, because the risks will grow, the risks of numerous nuclear powers. All of a sudden, instead of one Russia, you have 10 ill-prognosable countries, handled countries, and there's a risk of nukes going to some gray market. Here I'm adding also something for myself, especially after the march on Moscow by Prigozhin. It does show that Russia is in a very super fragile situation internally. And to make the West and itself as the hostage of that Moscow fragility, frailty, that somebody can just make a run for Moscow after a defeat on the battlefront. That risk is understood to be higher, especially after a success of Prigozhin and his maneuvers. So I suspect that's, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that the logic here is that after Prigozhin's situation, the West is horrified even more how weak Russian inner structure is and how gently they have to handle it in order not to break it into a bunch of shards. No, I think it's more of an illusion. I think we were happy that Putin left Moscow and there's a mutiny, but in the long run, where is Prigozhin? Everybody got a message what happens to mutineer. And Russia is still rather strong. According to the inner estimates, in about a year and a half, they will start breaking apart. But until then, they're pretty okay. Putin signed in a very militaristic budget, and they're preparing for that push. They're ready to spend a ton more money next year, and they're also expecting Trump to hopefully win in America. But these hopes are rather realistic, one can say, because in Belgium, in Netherlands, and some other parts of Europe, the right wing is winning. So they do hope that they will be able to conduct their politics with the West, which they always had good skills with, and they also hope that the West will sell the rope that the Russia will hang them on, because the scary war with Russia, with a lunch break and an option to buy oil from Russia, this is quite a story, right? So this is not so much frailty that I think they are afraid of. I think their Biden administration, as by the way, a system that inherited its main features from Obama administration when Biden was a VP, and Obama was presiding over the United States when Russia was annexing Crimea. It's in the same framework of the triangle that they just don't want to have Russia defeated, because otherwise it may become a nuclear satellite of China or a gray zone. So I was saying that during Prigozhin's mutiny, that in the Western media, some Western experts actually mentioned that the West took measures to prevent Prigozhin from winning so that Putin's regime would stay in power. And those publications actually did mention that falling apart of Russia in case of Prigozhin's win, so they're ready to pay with 4 Ukrainian districts in order for Russia to stay a single country. All right, a politics of a triangle, because there was a meeting of G20, a virtual one, but Putin made a statement there, and Biden and Xi Jinping refused to partake in it, in that meeting, which became an option now for media to say that Russia is outside the equation, that United States and China have made certain agreements and Russia is outside the formula. And that Xi Jinping understands who Trump is looking at his term, and he understands that he can probably strike better accords with Biden than with Trump, and perhaps remove or lesser or weaken the probability of a big conflict between China and the United States, and that's why Russia got some ignore punishment. No, I don't think so. I think Biden and Xi Jinping did not come to any serious conclusions. And the reason is that Xi Jinping is not sure that Biden will be there a year later in the White House. And then what's the reason to negotiate anything with him? And of course, they have nothing to say at G20 as a result of this, because they cannot come with no messages. When they come to forums of that caliber, people of that caliber representing their countries, they need to say something new. They cannot be repeating old statements. It's going to be a failure in this case. So they chose not to come. And Putin was the only beneficiary of that situation in this case. And by the way, did you see what he was talking about? He was regretting the war where Ukrainian civilians are dying, right? Oh yeah, in his speech he did make a statement that Russia never refused peace negotiations, basically answering the ball from Haas in his article, that Russia needs to be put to negotiations and be made responsible for ending this war. And Putin comes out and says that, of course, we are ready to negotiate. And Putin kind of comes out and says, we are here, we are ready, where's Ukraine? Ukraine is not negotiating. Well, Arachamia here, when he says that we should not be negotiating with Russia, one can support him. We should not be negotiating without any preconditions and statements, because otherwise the West will immediately cease military support of Ukraine, because that's what they do. When we start negotiating, they stop supporting arms. And that's, remember in Kherson, when we had some success, when we were negotiating with Putin in that time frame, the West stalled all supplies, and we did not get anything for a while. When the West restarted their supplies, it was too late. Russians has already dug the trenches and fortified the regions. And that's a definite feature of the West. It's difficult to object to David in this case. But it's a question what to talk about. If you formulate the goals of these negotiations correct, then you can avoid stopping on the military supplies. What we need to talk is about collective system of security in the world. And they have to be multilateral negotiations, because system of security in the world, Russia and Ukraine cannot build that, regardless of how we and if we agree. And system of collective security cannot allow to change the front line. So, as a result, the, for example, situation on the front needs to freeze, or perhaps Russia needs to withdraw some of the troops, because otherwise there'll be more military support to Ukraine. That's a good position to go into and say, guys, if you refuse to welcome our initiative, we will push more in the front. And it would be the right approach to negotiate with Russians. Unlike what the West does now, they usually cease supporting militarily us. At this point, basically continue exerting the pressure on Russia that if you guys do not do not become more flexible in negotiations tactics, then we will increase pressure. Then these negotiations will become beneficial all of a sudden, because if you, for example, start negotiations with Russia and then in the meantime supply 300 F-16s and ATACMS to Ukraine, then yeah, that'll be a whole other negotiation set, even without meaningful military result at the front. But that's the West, unfortunately. They immediately seize all military support and demonstrate whole military lack of threat to try to push the other party to negotiate. So they still haven't learned that lesson. So I want to clarify that here. You did talk about Ukraine going to the table of discussions, and then you explained that you were for that in order to provoke a discussion on the West, so they need to reconsider such a step, so they would understand that it is not beneficial, first of all, to the West to negotiate with Russia. Yeah, that attempt failed, but it doesn't mean that it needs to be stopped. I'm still here, still talking, still helping them to understand. But as I said before, the West, in ideal situation, needs to understand what will be the end result if Ukraine loses. Because in a simple scenario, Russia would torture and execute 1 million people, those who are absolutely pro-Ukrainian, right, the patriots. The rest would be sent to the penalty battalions, and they'll be all sent to fight the war with the West, to La Manche, to the French Channel. And the recent publication that German military forces can hold maybe for 2 days if there is a big-scale war with the Eastern Europe. And that tells you a lot. Because right now, Ukraine and Russia have two interesting assets. We both have the biggest armies in Europe, with rather serious arms and all. Yeah, because you can talk about Western Tomahawks and missiles and HIMARS and all. Right, but Russian electronic interference actually is rather successful in changing course of those HIMARS and shooting some of them down. So it's never a war in one gate, especially the war with the nuclear state, nuclear power. So that possible unity of Ukraine and Russia, this is another unrealized monster for the West, because if that happens, it'll be a scary scenario, and you can definitely scare a lot of politicians with this, because probably we should be bringing it out more often. If they're afraid of gray zone, well, how about a 3 million army with a perspective of annexing the whole Europe? I'm not even talking about genocide they'll do in Ukraine. I'm saying what happens if Russia gets Ukraine as a resource with GDP, with military resources and people. The West doesn't understand that otherwise. All right, let me reclarify that. I'm sorry about bringing it up, but I do have that question. What do you think? Should Ukraine talk now that we are ready to negotiate in a solo mode or in a format of G7? I think we should be saying that we are ready to create a new system of collective security in Europe. I think we talked about that when we were discussing that, and we had this initiative. Not negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, who gets how much territory. This is a false agenda. The real agenda would be to create an international security system in Europe and the world that would take in account real interests of different sides. Who has to be at the table of these negotiations, let's say from Ukraine, so that Ukraine would say, these are our representatives. Oh yeah, on the highest level. Absolutely on the highest level. You cannot go for lower. So G7 then, right? That format. Right, or people representing the top leadership of the country, where they can start. All right, then I have one more question to follow the topic of NATO. Because NATO is suggesting to create a military Schengen zone and acquire the ability to move NATO troops across NATO countries without getting separate agreements and allowances to move from individual countries. What if Hungary will say we're against it? Will it be a strong enough situation to expel Hungary from NATO? No, NATO is a different situation. Once you're a member, it's very difficult to expel you, and they probably will be just negotiating with Hungary and convincing it that this is an important step, an important thing to have. So if we don't go for all these negotiations, and we only talk about the initiative of Ukraine joining NATO in the current capacity, how much do we need to articulate that? What do you want to articulate? Koля, if this is a red line for Russia, they said everything except Ukraine in NATO. So if negotiations, then NATO. If not NATO, then negotiations, right? The only way for Ukraine to join NATO is to create such a system of collective security that it becomes a feature of that system. That's an important part of its construction, with which Russia would agree, because it will be explained to it that its territorial interests are actually protected by this construct. And by the way, there is this argument that NATO in this case becomes more reasonable and stops threatening Russia. I heard the arguments. Imagine a million worth army with Western arms and rather chauvinistic towards Russians. If NATO is not supervising it, they may do other things, right? They may go and take Rostov or something else. For now, they're not really afraid of that, but in general, this is a group of arguments that one can find, but one needs to then be really smart and be putting real cards on the table. And I'll say here a scary thing: we'll need to consider real interests of Russia. Without that, you'll not get a real meaning out of these negotiations. NATO also reemphasizes its work with Bosnia and Herzegovina, trying to normalize situation in that region and also preclude Russian interference in there. We remember there was a story a couple years ago between Serbia and Kosovo. There are some Serbian separatists, I guess Serbian population in Kosovo, that is being heated by some supplies from Serbian side, and they as if want to join Serbia with their enclave there. So do you think Russia can provoke an armed conflict there? Not only can, Russia will be trying to do it, because they need to create a system of more conflicts in the world, where United States will entangle themselves and will lose ultimately. As with Afghanistan, right? So look, Israel is a difficult situation for US. Ukraine is a difficult situation for US. If Bosnia gets on fire, or Lithuania and Poland, or Finland or Sweden or something, or in Africa they can start some fire, or maybe somewhere in the east, like Myanmar, United States will get tired reacting to all of that. And that's roughly what's happening right now, because American politics is now being led by probably the weakest crew in the last century. And that's the Obama strand still being strong there. All right, one more news that I think we need to comment in this stream is Yevgeny Chichvarkin, who lives in London, Russian opposition figure, who was making statements that the West did everything for Putin to win, and Putin is winning. The West has lost in sanctions war with Putin, and he mentioned that in his interview to the Live Nail publication. And Putin is now strengthening his position, saying that, look, Russia is now surrounded by enemies. Another Russian opposition figure, Alexander Nevzorov, said that Chichvarkin is just a depressive figure at the moment, but it is not a right statement. And not that it's morally wrong, but it's factually wrong. So Zakharova, a spokesperson for Russia, came out and said that, basically using his statement, said that this is just about United States. United States and Europe are fighting with Russia by means of Ukraine. They were solving their tasks. And they were also, United States is resolving an issue with leadership with Europe, taking over by making a hot conflict in Europe, between Europe, Ukraine, and Russia. Yeah, that's an old story. United States is probably at the 10-year low of their foreign politics. They're not quite sure where to go. And I can quote one serious figure from the West that I met a day before yesterday. He listened to my statements, where I was saying that with one hand, the West is saying thank you to Ukraine for defending us from Russia, and then buying resources with the other hand from Russia. And there's a fleet of gray tankers and chips and everything, selling goods back and forth, circumventing the sanctions and all. He's saying it's not that the capitalists are ready to sell everything for profit. The situation on the West is worse. He's saying that Western capitalists can't even calculate their profits properly. You will be hard pressed to find a proper capitalist in the style of Cecil Rhodes or Kipling times. The West has a Plato dilemma. They have one moral for Alans, another for Persians. That means no moral at all. So I was asking, was the West moral at some time? He was saying, yeah, up to a couple decades ago, the West was rather moral internally. But if you think there are real imperial vultures on the West who cold-heartedly calculate their profits in this war, you will be hard-pressed to find them. They don't even exist anymore. So when Putin is fighting the West, he sees the West as the group of, what word should I use here? People with whom he can always agree, and those people who are incapable of making serious decisions. He feels himself very comfortable in that situation. And there are no serious figures on the West who can play this game back. So Chichvarkin, in my opinion, is correct about a lot of things in his statement. And what about Nevzorov? That there is still some hope, but it's on the dripper? Yeah, probably a 1.5% that the West will wake up and understand the situation, but yeah, very low percentage probability. So, regardless of all that context, there is a project of European Union documents about giving Ukraine certain guarantees, and this project is saying that we need to realize a certain mechanism for providing arms and support to Ukraine that will also revive European military-industrial complex and will support Ukraine in their war-fighting effort. So my question, I think you've seen that, given the trends of European countries where we have now some anti-Ukrainian moods prevailing here and there, and looking at this trend, do you think this document in the framework of European Union be stable, long-lasting, and reliable? Or is it depending on the moods and this document will be trampled in a couple years? Well, Nikolay, let's start with the fact that they promised to deliver 1 million artillery shells by the new year and managed to only provide 300,000. Right? What are we talking about, Nikolay? As a declaration of intent, maybe. As the real political document filled by real political content, I totally don't believe that. That will have to have a much different mechanism underneath it, and then you kind of go back to that situation of creating the mutual security system. And those people who cannot make hard decisions, those who are very pliable, they will never be able to make decisions, strong decisions. So this is more of a statement of intent than anything. Alexei, we've been live for almost 2 hours in this stream, and I still have a ton of questions. Are we setting it on fire more, or do we wrap it up? Let's do 7 more minutes till we get to full 2 hours. Okay, so we have an agenda related to the tension lines within our country. All the military questions definitely do not add us unity, but then we also have language questions. And there is still problem, scandal going on. What Stefanchuk started, what we commented on last week. Ombudsman on defense of national language, Taras Kремень, also brought some wood to the fire, who came out and said there are no Russian-speaking Ukrainians, there are Ukrainian citizens, that's all we have. So please be kind to use just Ukrainian language. I actually visited his site to verify, but he is saying that Ukrainian language will be protected only when everybody will be using Ukrainian language in the country. So I think that ignores everything else that's happening about the tension on the language matter with Irina Farion and additional field in your passport about your nationality. So how do we treat these things? Well, let me say here, Taras Kремень, as the deputy from, I guess, Regions Party, I think he misunderstands his role as the language ombudsman. His task is to protect language rights of citizens, all citizens, not the title part of your citizenship. Bulgars, Russians, and the others, all the groups living in Ukraine. And he's saying basically, no other languages need protection. I only understand my role as protecting the Ukrainian language. He needs to be the part of the machine that resists the repressive machine. And he understands his role as part of the repressive machine, as the one who needs to push on those who, from his point of view, is incorrect on the language matter. So it's a 180-degree different position from what he should be occupying. So he basically is conducting an administrative crime by these statements. And he also made another interesting statement. He said that on the front, our soldiers are shooting when they hear in the direction of Russian language, when they hear it. But the problem is that a good half of our troops are speaking Russian language on the front. So he kind of supported the idea of shooting at our own citizens who speak Russian. So he supported Farion's statement and our repressive machine statement about and all the proponents of the Ukrainian language in the country. So he's being, instead of being an ombudsman, he is now a part of the machine of repression and language police. Well, he's, it's blatant violation, in my point of view. So what about the guarantor of our constitution? Is he going to step in? Where is his political remark to that situation? And here, unfortunately, for these figures, for that language police, they were caught up with a very unfortunate event from Europe. Because with the efforts from our friends of European Council by demand of Venetian Commission, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine actually prepared a law 10288. And the goal of this law is to lower the threshold for use of Ukrainian language, the demand for use of Ukrainian language in all schools of Ukraine. Because right now, 100% of schools are teaching in Ukrainian. And now we are looking at this document. It says that private universities can use any language they want, and schools need to bring it down. In media, in government media, it needs to go down from 80 to 30%. So very basic and logical demands, in my view. But that will be probably a heart attack for the language police, because they'll be screaming, and they're already screaming, that it's damn Moscow. And it's not Moscow, it's European Union. So that's an old saying, either take the cross off or put the pants on. That tells you that the dual morality story, that if you are going to European Union, these are the rules that you need to follow. They don't do language chauvinism. They actually provide human rights. So you guys make a decision. Do you want 2 trillion deficit in a budget? Do you want military aid and joining NATO? Or do you want your language police things? Because otherwise it looks like, guys, give us a lot of money and take us in your ranks. And they're saying, sure, we'll take you in our ranks. We'll give you some money, but here are our demands. And we come back and say, no, we don't care about your demands. We need you to fulfill ours. That's a very interesting position, right? That's where Europe actually raises an eyebrow and says, you guys are bold, like, I'm not going to bring this comparison out loud. All right. So our discussion in this regard, I think a very strong argument from your side was when you said that we will not be able to hold this territory if we want to maintain our territory the size of France and Germany, the size of biggest European countries, maybe even bigger. And in this framework of one language and one ethnicity, we cannot hold it as a mono-national country. Absolutely, Nikolay. We got this territory from Soviet Union. It was supported by unbreakable borders of the order of Europe, the agreement in Europe. Unfortunately, that system of relations crumbled, and now everything changed. The values, the motivation, the powers at the table. So a lot of things are being reviewed, including the borders. And our level of organization will not allow us to hold these borders, because we inherited them as part of a modern project, which USSR was. Not that USSR was a modern civilization, it had elements of it. And when it fell apart, all the countries fell down to their original state, to the relations of 17th century, many of them. And the system of 17th century does not allow us to hold it in the current state. And Ukraine, we wanted to. And Yuriy Romanenko said a very good phrase: we're holding Ukraine to the degree of our civilization. The more civilized we are, the more advanced we are, the larger territory we can hold. So that's what we have now, minus 20%. But since we're idiots, we apparently are now jumping all on the bandwagon of chauvinism, of language chauvinism. I'm going to say that we'll probably lose more territories in this case. And Being more specific, let's say I spent enough time in Odessa. There is nobody in Odessa who would support removing the monument to Vorontsov in there. It's like removing a monument to Karl the Great in Europe, or maybe remove Rommel and Rem from history of Rome. Vorontsov is a key figure for that whole southern Russia, Nova Russia, Potemkin project back in the Catherine the Great times. He is everything for Odessa. He's the historic figure. So now they're removing that monument. That's a spit in the soul of every Odessa citizen. And conducting politics like that, that decreases the authority of organization, that decreases the authority of political power and creates tension cracks in the society. So these idiots, that's why I'm using this word, they're working exactly in opposition to national security of Ukraine, while I'm trying to fight for it, to increase our efficacy and to increase human rights and guarantee human rights here. And those people who do that, they're called agents of Moscow, while the ones who are destroying stuff and who want to shrink our territory and bring down our political system, they're called patriots. I'm talking about dual morality and the perspectives of this system. One clarification here, Alexei, you did mention that Taras Kremen, he was from Regions Party. I just verified that he was not in the Regions. He was People's Front, but Kivshina, and other parties, but he has never been to Regions, so it's probably a good correction. Right. Apologies for me presuming that he was from the Regions Party, but only for that. The fact remains that he is still a part of repressive machine instead of being a protector of language rights of our citizens. We made this statement. I think history will make its statement too. Thank you, Alexei, for the stream. We've been live for about 2 hours and a couple more minutes. I think most of questions we have commented. All those people who were waiting patiently for you to come back on the stream, I think got rewarded. Right, we talked about the key points. All right, to finish that stream, thank you all who watched us. Do not forget to click the like button, make sure more people see that. And do not forget to subscribe to Alpha channel, to Alexei's channel if you have not done that yet, and of course to Privateer Station if you are listening or watching that in English. And a reminder, there is a fundraiser at the bottom of this video for Andrew Weber, American volunteer who died here in Ukraine defending our freedoms. And it's the link to gofundme.com. Unfortunately, Ukrainian citizens cannot support it from within Ukraine, so you have to be out in the United States or Europe, and then you can support this one. By the way, the other fundraiser was closed. We closed this one real well for the Ukrainian troop. So I'll put in my link some other one, what we already filtered and have from the active requests. Because regardless of the mess that is in the heads of society and politicians, soldier needs to be provided as many resources as we can give them. Glory to Ukraine military, glory to heroes.